Hello and welcome to a new calculator tutorial for the TI-84 Plus. Today we'll be discussing how to use histograms in a TI calculator. If you have seen the video previously on one-var stats, I will be using the same data as that video. So I will be showing how to create histograms for normal situations when you just have a list of data, or when you already have a frequency list of data set up beforehand. Okay, so to show, I have my values in my list. I access stat, my lists are in edit, and in this case, I have my individual list. List 1 is just a list of 35 different values between 1 and 15. My other two lists, list 3 and list 4, are frequency data. List 3 is a list of values from 1 to 12, and list 4 is the frequencies for each of those. So in this case, I have 2 respondents that said 1, I have 1 respondent that said 2, 4 respondents that said 3, 5 that said 4, 7 that said 5, etc., etc. Meaning that I have more than just 12 pieces of data. I have, I think, 59 last I remember. But regardless, we're going to be using histograms on both of these separately. Okay, now to access statistical graphs in a calculator, we want to access stat plot, which is in the top left corner, highlighted in blue, or another color depending on your calculator choice. Maybe yellow if you have an 83. To access stat plot, because it is blue for mine, I'm going to hit the blue button second and hit Y equals. Here I get my stat plot menu. I have 3 different plots. One of them I have turned on, the other I have turned off. In almost every circumstance, I only ever suggest having a single plot on. The only time you'd have multiple plots on is if you're trying to compare 2 different plots together, which mostly happens with box plots or box and whisker plots. But with histograms, scatter plots, you should only have 1 on. Okay. But you might have them all off, and we can fix that. So we go into plot 1. First option will be if it's on or off. If you have never done graphs before, it's probably set as off. What you need to do to set it on is simply go over to the word on and press enter. You'll even see at the top we have plot 1, plot 2, plot 3, and in this case plot 1 is highlighted indicating that I have it selected, but plot 2 and plot 3 are not. If those are highlighted, then that actually means that they are turned on, and you might want to be careful. Okay, but now I have plot 1 on. Here I have 6 different options. Might be in 2 different rows depending on your calculator. First one's for scatter plots, then line charts. The third one, the one that looks like a histogram, is the histogram option, the one we will be selecting. So I go over to that, the one that I have currently highlighted, and I press enter. And then my screen will change slightly. Now I have 2 more prompts to give. The first one is my X list, my list of values. In this case, I'm first using my first list, which is in list 1. So I already have that set in. The second one is frequency. Now, unlike one-var stats, if I do not have a frequency list, I want this to say the number 1. The reason is that is saying that each of my values in my X list indicates a single value. If I put a different value too, or if I try to delete it, I'm going to get errors or I'm going to get incorrect values. But great, I have everything set up now. I have the type, I have it on, I have my X list and frequency list set up correctly. If you have 84 plus, you might be able to change the color, but that's a preference. If not, it's not important. Now, before I try to jump the gun and hit this graph button in the top right corner, what I want to do instead is zoom in appropriately, because if I do graph, it's probably going to use the window that I've had set in before, and it might not go around the histogram itself. It will give an ugly picture. So what I want to do instead is hit zoom. So I hit zoom. You're going to want to do this for any stat plot. So once I've made that stat plot, I have a bunch of zoom options, and this will help structure the window so it'll be focused around my graph itself. The one that I specifically want, because I just made a stat plot, is the 9th option, zoom stat. It'll be the 9th option for 84s as well as 83s. So I can either scroll down to it by clicking down until I have 9 and then hit enter, or faster, I can just hit the number 9 and it'll use that number. So I'm going to hit number 9. And voila, I have a nice little histogram. And it's well framed as well. It looks pretty nice, and you can get a sense of the values themselves. Here I can see a little bit of skew going towards the right, I'd say. I wouldn't say that this is normally distributed, but I can get an idea of what's happening. Even further, I can hit this trace button next to zoom, and it will put a cursor at the top of the first bar, indicating at the bottom the minimum, the first value it starts at, as well as the maximum, and it shows a less than sign, because as you know, histograms should never include its maximum in each class. That maximum goes into the next class. So this is 1 up to all values up to 3.33, but not including. And it says n equals 6, indicating there are 6 values in that bar, or in that class. And then I can use the arrow keys to go back and forth to see how many values are in each set, which is pretty cool. However, I see something kind of odd here. My minimum for the last class is 15, and my maximum is less than 17.33. But this is kind of weird choicing. And even the intervals themselves between my values are kind of strange. It's using 2.33 as a class width. No idea why it did that, but that's because the calculator made its own choice. And even stranger, my largest value is 15, so why have a class that just starts at 15? So that's a little bit strange. However, I can change this, which is particularly nice if I have a class length that I need to adjust. For example, if I know that the class length that I want to make for this is a length of 3, I can make it so. To do that, I had a little bit of an error there. Let's go back to zoom 9. Okay, so I'm back out on my graph. Now what I want to do is hit window. This will help me adjust the graph as I need. I have X-min and X-max. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I want to make a class width of 3. That way, my values will start at 1, and then the next first class goes from 1 up to 4. The following goes from 4 to 7, 7 to 10, 10 to 13, and 13 to 16. That covering my entire graph. Meaning I can even adjust the X maximum. So that way I don't have any strange values. The X scale was strangely chosen, but that's because the calculator decided itself. Alright, now that I have this, I want to graph, not zoom stat. If I do zoom stat, it will do the calculator's choice for X scale. Again, nothing will have changed. But with these options, I can hit graph, and I'll see what I get. Okay, different graph. I have smaller class or a less amount of classes. However, one of them has towered a little too high. If I trace, the first one goes up to 6, the second one goes up to 11, which is apparently too high. I think this graph goes up to about 8 or 9. So we can adjust that again. I go back to window. I know it needs to be at least a height of 11, so let's go to window and just overestimate a little bit. The height, or Y max, needs to be at least 11, so let's say 12, just so I can see the top of the bar. And then I can go back and graph. And there we go. Now that I have the full graph in screen with the width or class length that I desired. Awesome. And again, I can trace these values and find out what I need. Great. Okay. So that's making a histogram for normal data. Now, again, remember that I had another set of data in my lists. In list 3 and list 4, I had frequency data. So let's deal with that. It will be graphed in the same way. I'm going to go to second, y equals stat plot. And I'm going to mess with plot 1. I could turn plot 1 off and go to plot 2 and make it, but why do that? Very often I'm only ever looking at one plot at a time. If I need to go back and forth, then that might be an option for me. But here I'm just going to overwrite plot 1. So I'm going to keep it on. It's already on histograms, which is great. In this case, my X list, my list of values, is in L3. So I access that by hitting second 3. You'll see the L3 above that. And also in this case, I do have a frequency list, so I'll be posting that as well, which is in list 4. So second, 4. Great. I have my data, and I should be able to zoom in appropriately. Now my data went from 1 to 12, so maybe I want to adjust, but let's see how the calculator does it itself. So again, zoom, and zoom stat, which is the 9th option. And there I go. I get my graph, which does have quite a few classes. This one has 8 classes for a distance of 12 numbers, which is a little bit strange. And you can even see, as I'm looking at the minimum and the maximum of each of these classes, these are strange. Minimum of 4.14, maximum of 5.714. These are kind of strange values to use in terms of finding a class width. So what I'm going to do instead is again adjust. Now, I know my minimum was 1, my maximum was 12, and let's use a class length of, say, 3. So that way I go from, again, 1 to 4, 4 to 7, 7 to 10, and 10 to 13. So, with my maximum value overall being 12, I don't need to set my X max to be too high. Then, I can see if I need to adjust the Y min and Y max, but let's first graph this with my new bounds and see if that's necessary. And it sure seems that it is. Here, I have a class that goes up to 17 and another class that goes up to 23 based on my tracings here. So that means that my highest class goes up to 23. So again, let's over adjust. Let's make a Y max of 24 so I can see the top of the bar. I hit graph with my new Y maximum, and there I go. I get my new histogram. In this case, I have a histogram that I'd say is more skewed to the left than anything else. And once again, I can trace my values. I see my mins and maxes as expected, and the number of values in each class. Wonderful. That is how you create histograms in a calculator. Remember that if you are going to be doing more plots in the future, to either turn off a plot that you've already made or overwrite it. And also, very often, what I get questions with is something like this happens, where people will go to stat plot, will have everything in plot 1 correct, and we'll try to do zoom stat, and we'll get an error sometimes. Something like this, error syntax. Very often, the root of the cause is that there are values in y equals that don't make sense. It happens all the time with a calculator that's shuffling around in a backpack, accidentally hits a few buttons, and if I hit y equals, I see the source of the problem once I go through quit to get out of this error. I hit y equals, and there I go. I see this plus plus in this y equals. You have no idea how often this is the entire root of the cause. And I get students that are frustrated on exams, on quizzes, in class, that nothing is working, and that's all it is. If this happens to you, clear anything out. Even if it's an equation of a line, you probably don't want it there. But any errors are probably being caused by this. Alright, with that said, that's everything on histograms. I hope this was able to help you in your classes. If you have any questions, feel free to put a comment below. Or if you're in one of my classes, feel free to just come up and talk to me and I'll see what I can do. With that, I'm done, and I'll see you in the next video.